Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 16 of the podcast, Consistently Inconsistent. This is your host, uh, Toon Schulten, Toon Schulte, however the fuck you want to say it. Um, so, I haven't uploaded in a while, mainly because I'm going through a couple of things. I'm transitioning into some new things. I'm going to be currently studying, I'm quitting, and I'm moving back to America. And also for the fact that there hasn't been really anything that I've wanted to say or needed to say. You know, like I was thinking I could have done podcasts with people, but I needed to focus a little bit more on the things that I was doing, and I also didn't have anything to say. I think I just repeated myself, but it doesn't matter. But anyways, for this podcast, I want to try something interesting, and this actually came from, or this idea came from, uh, the show Rick and Morty. You guys probably know Rick and Morty, um, and another Netflix show. I actually didn't watch it, but I just watched the preview, and it got me thinking about something. And this thing will be it's a bit of an ambitious thing, but basically, I want to be talking about the future of human evolution. So, yeah, this is a bit of a weird topic, and to be fair, I'm not well educated on this. This is just more of like a thought um, experiment, or it's a hypothetical. I'm just kind of thinking about things and trying to see, or just to kind of develop some ideas about this, because I think it'll be interesting. I think it's important to talk about the future of human evolution, which I'll get to in a sec, but it's important because it's going to happen, right? And not only um, does it happen now, but it happens in the future as well as it happened in the past. So this is something that humans have dealt with for years, centuries, whatever. Like this is not anything particularly new. Um, well, obviously it's not new. It's human evolution. I mean, how else did we become humans? But anyways, enough of the intro. So I'm going to kind of I'm going to outlay what I know and what I've seen, and then somehow further my development in the thinking. So you're basically going to listen to me try to improve what I know about the topic, or at least get some new ideas on the topic. Um, okay, so we'll begin. So there are there are two aspects of human beings, right? You have the biological part of human beings, in which, how do you say, like you evolve, right? Like we had Neanderthals, like all the old we had Homo sapiens, all that. I'm not well versed in the early um, evolution of human, or at least not the specific types of people, because there were many different types and many different eras, all with different characteristics and cognitive ability. So, yeah, so you have that aspect of it. Then you have the second aspect, which is basically your as I said, like cognitive ability, your ability to think, right? Because before thinking existed, evolution was basically like who has the best genetics to survive. Like if you live in the desert, who requires the least amount of water to survive, or who can obtain the water in the best way in the desert to survive. There are many different ways you can survive in the desert, obviously, right? So that's kind of that 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 is what evolution was and still is. But now you have human beings, and human beings, even though like even though people somehow don't classify themselves as animals, which blows my mind, right? Like if you don't think that human beings are animals, you're retarded. Like I'm sorry, if you walk up to me and say that human beings aren't animals, it's like I'll just turn around and walk away because there's no point in having a conversation with you because you obviously don't understand biology, evolution, science. Like you don't understand these things. So I want to make one thing very fucking clear here, right? Humans are animals. So humans are animals, but they're animals that have the ability to think, which how do you say? I think other animals in a way have the ability to think, but they don't have the ability to think as human beings do, right? Like we can write things down, we can think of the past, um, we can do things so that the future will be more successful. Um, we also try to understand and live in the present moment. So we have different characteristics from almost all animals on planet Earth, right? Um, the one thing that is interesting about thinking, right, is that thinking itself has a form of evolution, right? Like if you go back 2,000 years, right, it's like if you stole a piece of bread, you have your hand cut off or something like that, right? It's like that was the thinking that was at the time uh, culturally acceptable, as well as understandable, right? Like you steal something, you lose your hand because you used your hand to take the piece of bread. So therefore, you don't know how to use your hand, so you don't deserve your hand. That was kind of the what to me seems like the psychology behind something like that. It's like the an eye for an eye, right? Um, yeah, so you had those socially acceptable things. Now, obviously, today, at least in Western society and maybe more modern societies, even on the east side of the world, that is normally not acceptable. Like, you can't just cut someone's hand off. Like, you can imprison them, but you can't cut off their hand. All right, because that's not fair, or depending on how you view what fairness is, at least today, we don't consider that a fair punishment, right? So if human thinking runs along a line of improvement, which is basically what evolution is, for biology terms, right? What would that mean for thinking in the future, right? Thinking itself will evolve, right? We are aware of a lot of things, right, about human beings. Um, and the thing was is that though the things that we were are aware of today have existed for a long time. However, in previous history, a lot of people did not or were not aware of those things. And honestly, they couldn't be aware of those things because they don't have the time to try to understand or conceptualize or think about those things, right? Most of the time it's like, where am I going to get the next meal, right? Or I have a family, I need to protect them, I need to learn how to protect myself, right? It's like we have things like that today, but not really. It's like you can go, like in America, you can go buy a gun. Anywhere in the world, you can learn jujitsu or some sort of martial arts to protect yourself, right? But you learn that stuff in the intent of defending yourself. But back then, it was like, look, you had to learn how to fight, to kill as well as to defend yourself, right? Or you had to learn how to attack and defend at the same time. While now, most of the time, a lot of people, um, they you only really need to learn how to defend yourself because most people aren't going to attack. We're considered, or in today's society, we consider ourselves civilized, even though that's a bit of a how do you say? I don't fully agree that human beings today are civilized, at least in a Western society point of view. Like they are like I know what people mean by that they're civilized, right? Like they're not killing each other, but civilized is a term that can always be moved around. Like as we develop our civilization further and further, what we consider civilized shifts with that civilization. So, anyways, So I think this also kind of relates to thinking, right? Like most people think nowadays, right, to kind of protect what they have. They because thinking is something that's hard. It's not something that's seen, right? Like most of it, like evolution is something you physically see. You see a cat eating a mouse. You see a lion eating a zebra. Like that is evolution on a physical level and a level of reality, a level in which you can visualize and conceptualize those things, right? But thinking is not something you can necessarily, you can't see your thinking. I mean, you can write it down, you can draw, you can build something. That's basically making what you think into reality. But there's still a certain level of thinking that we have, right? Like, we have, okay, so we have a certain level of thinking, right? So that means that means two things, right? Two things. We are not done thinking because we can continue thinking, so thinking will never end. Second, does that what will that thinking look like? Like in a sense, like you have like thinking is a pattern, right? Like your brain is kind of like a computer. It goes in a loop. Like for example, if you um, let's say you like taking a bubble bath every day, or you like smoking cigarettes, right? It's like those things that you do become habits. Those habits are like circuitry that has been ingrained in your brain. Like for example, nicotine hooks onto the brain, so you become addicted to cigarettes, and therefore you need to. However, you can stop smoking cigarettes. I don't know why I brought the bubble bath up thing. That was stupid. Ignore the fact that I said that. Let's just continue with the cigarettes. It's the easiest thing. So um, yeah, so you can quit cigarettes, and basically what you have to do is you have to wait. Like if you stop smoking cigarettes, right? You basically are waiting for your brain to go, okay, I kind of have an understanding of when and why I need to smoke cigarettes. So, and now that I understand this, I can better realize, okay, I don't need to smoke cigarettes. Or basically, yes. However, one of the interesting things is that if you started smoking and then quit smoking, you are also at risk of starting to smoke again because you kind of that how do you say the nicotine, the hook of addiction that it's created in your brain still in a way exists, except you've chosen to ignore that necessity or need that your brain has kind of gotten used to forming, right? Because your brain forms as you develop, right? The it's like clay. Your brain is like clay. If you want to learn something, you have to sit down and you have to practice that thing over and over, discipline, right? You have to continue doing it, and eventually you have created a loop in your brain that does exactly what you want it to do, and maybe even better, right? Because when you have a loop in your brain, you can kind of jump off that loop. It becomes easier, right? So for example, if you if you're really mentally strong in athletics, right? So you're good at running, right? Then that running, or let's say you do a specific sport in running, right? Like you do 100 meters. If you do 100 meters, right, you have a understanding of a, a, a somewhat understanding of what running is and what it is like, right? I mean, there's obviously differences between long form running and short form running, like short distance running, but there are still some similarities, right? So if you took a person who does 100 meters and a person who doesn't do any form of exercise or running, right? And you told them, okay, go learn how to run a marathon. The person who runs the 100 meters has an easier time figuring out how to run a marathon because they already have a sort of, they have information in their brain that allows them to do it, right? Which is like, this is all basic stuff. But oh fuck, I've completely yeah. See, this is kind of what I mean by like this is me thinking for the first, like this is me thinking about a topic for the first time. So sometimes you run into dead ends, right? Like I'm just talking about something, I have no fucking idea what it was about. Well, I know what I was talking about, like the evolution of thinking, right? Yeah, okay, okay. So you have the evolution of thinking. You have characteristics of thinking, right? Everyone is good at something or has the ability to be good at something, right? Not necessarily the best, not, but you do have the ability to be better at something than someone else. No matter how small or how big it is, you have the ability, right? So I think this translates to the same as thinking, right? If thinking has to be in a way improvable, you can make thinking more efficient, right? So let's say you make thinking more efficient. You make it efficient in the sense that you know you know a good amount that helps you learn other things at a quicker rate, right? But that's also why people go down certain paths, right? Like if you're an engineer, right, you understand engineering, but it's very difficult to understand engineering. So you sacrifice your ability to learn other things for engineering. But you also, what's also kind of interesting is like people also have a drive to learn something specific. Like, why do you have a drive to learn something specific? That doesn't make any sense, right? It's like you're born, okay? It's cool, you have life experiences, and everyone likes learning. Like, I think everyone enjoys learning. They just have their own particular way of learning things, right? And I think this is also very important. I think one thing that people have, okay, so this is actually kind of a good point, right? Everyone learns in their own way, right? And I do know that there was a study done, and um, they try to figure out what was the best form of learning, right? Listening, seeing, writing, whatever, right? And they basically found that there, like, if you look at something of how something's done and you listen to how something's done, there are very small differences in the significance it gives you to learn that thing. Like, you still kind of have this, like, each person is different, but you still generally have this a similar ability to learn that thing no matter the way you learn it, right? But everyone kind of has their preference, right? That you kind of have your own domain of understanding and kind of learning something, right? Like if you were to do research for something, right? Like one person might be super organized and categorized with the ability to learn specifically exactly what they need to learn. Except however, their domain of thinking hinders them or stops them from different forms of thinking, right? So someone else is a different form or a way of researching something. So, and because they have a different form, they could reach different conclusions with the type of thinking they have, right? So there, I would consider there are different types of thinking. I think everyone thinks, but the way you think and how you use thinking, everyone utilizes in a different way. So if you, it, so then the question is, how far can thinking go, right? So we can kind of, everyone thinks, that's pretty basic. People have their own ways of understanding and thinking about things, right? Some people, they need a certain form of, they need information to work in a certain way for them to fully understand what they need to know. Yes? So the question is, what levels of thinking will exist in the future? Like, what would thinking look like in the future? As well as another interesting thing is like, would thinking then be able to, how do you say, like, will thinking ever be able to be visualized? Like, I know people talk about like nano chips and stuff like that, but it, like, one thing about technology, right, is when you improve something, right, or I wouldn't even say improve, when you create something, right, and that something does a certain thing, right? Fuck. Technology. What was I talking about? Technology. Yeah. Okay. So if you have a certain level of thinking, God fucking damn it, I was see that like man, this stuff is sometimes so hard to fucking think about. Like, fuck. What was the original idea? I like now I have to think for a second because it's when you're thinking about something and you're talking about it out loud, it's a bit hard because your brain gets confused. There's no um you don't have kind of like a path in which you can walk along to explore this thinking. You kind of have to each it's like mining in a cave, right? It's like you mine in a cave, you're mining, and then at a certain point you have to stop, right? And then you leave. However, the pathway that you've mined is still there. You can still walk back the next day and continue mining from the same place. Though, just like mining, you can have collapses, things go wrong, you can get stuck, stuff like that, right? So, okay. Actually, that's a good idea. Well, let's say we consider thinking like mining, right? Because I think thinking kind of runs along evolutionary terms. Like I th- I think that people's ability to think was only created based off of what people have seen. So I think because people see evolution and have dealt with it, I think people think in evolutionary terms, right? Like in the sense that, well, I mean, you're an animal as well, so of course you're thinking in evolutionary terms because evolution has created you as animals, so that wouldn't make any sense. But fuck. Okay, oh yeah. So we take thinking like mining, for example, right? Okay. How have we improved mining? Like if you think about it, right? Like thinking is basically a form of getting resources. Those resources are ideas. Those ideas are useful in doing things in the world, right? It's the same as like if you're mining gold or coal, right? You mine coal because coal does something for you in the real world. There's no like you wouldn't mine gold or coal or whatever fuck mineral you're mining. Like you're not mining it because there's no use. You're mining it because there is a use. And you're willing to spend time, money, effort, blood, sweat, tears, all for that um all for that material, right? So ideas are that material and thinking is the act of mining in a sense, right? Like meditation or whatever. So if you how do you say I don't know the history of mining, so this is something I will have to go research or think about because I think this could be kind of an interesting thing to observe. But how is mining improved, right? I mean there are like how do you say it used to be people just go mine like I'm pretty sure the first time like metal was discovered was just because it was found laying around. Like what is it? Copper or tin and stuff like that, right? They are found in rivers or streams and stuff like banks, kind of like something to do with water. Same with gold, right? So and that's how people kind of discovered and found them because they would just see it laying around and they would be like, "What the hell is this?" And then they started using it, and that's kind of how people pushed forward in tools, right? They kind of started to understand what what material was and what it did and how it could be used. And once you kind of understand that, then you can understand what material, sorry, how material or how specific materials improve in what you're doing, right? So thinking is the same thing, right? So if you improve mining, so first then you started going underground, which is what people then started doing, which is pretty much what philosophy is, trying to understand the the deeper levels of human beings and extracting them so that they're useful for everyday life, right? So it's like, uh, what is it, Stoicism or something? The the philosophy or ideology of not giving a fuck, right? Like that's something that was discovered. It's not something that like people weren't born with stoicism. It's something that was thought about, understood, and developed, right? Okay, so that's also an interesting thing. So people think about something, they discover something, and then they continue to try to understand and prove that. So they conceptualize it. I don't know. I have no idea if this is going to be interesting or not, because I'm not sure if people would want to listen to someone trying to think about something, because, well, I mean, I guess that's kind of what most of my podcasts are, but most of them are things that I have actually thought about and understood. But this is something relating to things that I don't fully understand, right? Like to think about thinking is something that is fucking difficult, right? Like you have to understand enough of the world and enough of nature, biology, consciousness, human relations, animals, stuff like that, right? You have to know a good amount to kind of understand what thinking is, because in my mind, right, people have the ability to perfect thinking, right? That's kind of what artificial intelligence is and stuff like that, right? But why humans are limited in their thinking because of their instincts, right? Like a dude can't just fully fucking think about everything because he wants to do other shit. Like he wants to be successful in a society. He wants to fuck people. He wants to eat food. He wants to go see the world. Like he wants to go do shit, right? So he can't spend his whole fucking time thinking. But what if you were in a way, what if you had the ability of understanding and discovering how you can change the way or change the ability of people's minds to think, right? But then you also have the issue of IQ, right? IQ measures the kind of limitations of people's ability to think. And IQ is not specifically intelligence. IQ is relating to your ability to analyze a situation, and understand it, right? Like that's what IQ is. Because, but even that, man, even IQ, there's something about that I don't, right? Like, okay, for example, right? If you go online and take an IQ test online, right? And they ask you a specific amount of questions, and these questions are basically designed to kind of gauge your understanding and ability to figure new things out, right? But a lot of them are also based off of things that you quote unquote should know, right? But if you don't know them, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're stupid, right? That just means you don't know them. But that also doesn't mean you don't have the ability to know them, right? So like an IQ question will basically be along the lines of like um what they'll put like a bunch of letters, um like they'll take Pacific Ocean, right? And then they'll scramble the letters, and then they'll be like, what ocean is this word, basically. So they're like, or they'll put like a, like a word, and then they scramble it, and it's like, what is this word, right? Now look, if you if you are not aware of words or don't have a good understanding of words, it's like, how are you then able to do that, right? It's not that you don't have the ability to understand it. It's just that you never tried to understand it. If you've never tried to understand something, how could you then not know, or how could you then be judged on your ability to think? Because that's pretty much what IQ is. As I said, IQ is not specifically what you know; it's your ability to know, right? So if your IQ is high, then you have a higher, you have a quicker rate of understanding something, right? You have a better understanding of how to understand something, right? So then the question is, okay, so if IQ has people that have the better, or if IQ measures the ability for people to understand something better than other people, does that mean that the ability to understand something is able to be taught, right? I mean, like, oh, because I guess that's what wisdom is then, right? Okay, wow, fuck, I'm an idiot. So if you Okay, so that means that there's two forms of intelligence, right? You have your ability to analyze, and then the things that you actually know. So it's your ability to learn something, and then your ability to understand something, and then it's also what you actually know. So it's like kind of what a mixture of intelligence is, because intelligence is basically your ability to think, right? Like that's it's kind of what intelligence is measuring. Okay. So you then have wise people, then you have smart people, and then you have people with potential in a weird way, right? Okay, so then we have to look at the form of wise people, right? Okay, let's take your grandmother or something, for example, a person that's older than you. Have I been talking for 32 minutes? What the fuck? Jesus Christ, man. Dude, that felt like 5 minutes to me. Okay. Well, okay, so you take a wise man, right? Does a wise what does a wise man or a woman fucking gay gender bullshit fucking faggoty ass cancer bullshit fuck that shit. Take a wise man, right? This person, okay, this person isn't necessarily intelligent, right? In the sense that, or it might not even have an high IQ, because a person who is wise does not mean that they have a high IQ. They just know a lot of things, right? Okay, so a wise person is someone who knows a lot of things. You have a person with high IQ who has the ability to understand things in a quick manner. So then also the question is, okay, so this is a question. Can you accelerate the ability of people to think, right? Like, is IQ fully determined? Like, is IQ determined purely on the fact of genetics? Because I don't think that that's the case, right? Intelligence is not something that's purely genetics. It's something that's related to how you grew up, what you were taught, how you were taught, in the environment that you were taught. So all of those things have a big factor in your ability to understand something, right? Like, for example, poor people, people with less education have, in a sense, a lower IQ than people who are more wealthy, because people with more wealth have the ability to, they have more stability, they have less stress, they have more time, they have more food. So they have time to think and try to understand things, right? So some of that is genetics, and then of course you have societal influences, you have environmental influences, you have um, you have internal influences, right? It's also like what is your objective, right? So like, for example, if you're a person who cares about animals, it's like there's a reason why you care about animals. It's not like I like animals. It's like that's not that's not a good Like, sure, you can, like a zookeeper, right? Like someone who studies animals or person who looks after animals, right? You ask them why do they like dealing with animals, right? And they're like, because I like animals. It's like that's a shit answer, man. That's a shitty answer. You don't like working with animals because you like animals, right? Like there are many reasons why you're working with animals, right? Maybe it's the behavior of the animals. Maybe it's also the fact that you're not very good with human beings or you don't particularly want to spend your time with human beings, right? So I guess it's also so that's another thing, right? It's your ability to it's also what you spend your time on. That's also an important factor in intelligence, I guess. Well, that kind of relates to the poor wealthy thing, right? Wealthy people normally have more time. That's also why they become more wealthy because they have the time to become wealthy. Poor people don't have that time because they have to spend a lot of their time making sure that they keep their head above water. But if you have a yacht, right, you can fucking do whatever you want on the water. Like, that's not an issue. It's pretty much what wealthy, poor people are in a, how do you say, it? In a social and economic sense. I guess that's something. Um, Fuck, man. I honestly I don't even know what I said for the last like 36 minutes. I hope I didn't talk too fast. You know, this will be interesting. If you're listening to this and you know me, right, and you've gotten to this part, tell me what you think about this type of episode, right? Like I want to like is me trying to think about things like me trying to think about things, right? In this form, in a way where I'm not really talking about things that I've thought before or things that I know already, but just taking something and trying to think it out, right? Is that interesting? Because um I mean I guess that's pretty much what a conversation is as well, but tell me like what do you do? Like do you think along? Do you try to like kind of think with me? Are you trying to debate me? Like what is going on in your head when you're listening to this, right? I mean, maybe you're listening to this but not really even paying attention, which is completely fine. As long as I get the man, as long as I get the play, I don't give a fuck. No, that's jokes. Well, I mean, no, I'm kidding. Um, Yeah, okay. I'm gonna end this episode here because I don't really have anything else to say, and I'm hungry as shit. So I'm gonna go get some food. Um, anyways, guys. Again, thank you for listening. I don't know how consistent I'll be at uploading podcasts because there are a bunch of things that are going on. Um, kind of like I'm moving some things around in my life. Um, And a podcast is something that you takes a lot of mental focus, right? You have to, you, depending on what you do. But anyway, I don't need to explain it to you guys. You also don't give a fuck. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, hope you guys have a good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever the fuck. Have a good day. See ya.